2015. New York Times, headline, Life in Canada, home of the world's most affluent middle class. How things have changed after 9 years of NDP Liberals. The economy today per capita is actually smaller than it was 10 years ago. Per capita income has dropped more in Canada than any other G7 country since the year before COVID. The gap between US GDP per capita and Canadian is now 50%, the biggest gap in 100 years. Will the Prime Minister recognize that taxing, punishing, and attacking our businesses is losing us jobs?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
What the Leader of the Opposition refuses to accept is that cuts to services and programs that Canadians are relying on is not going to grow the economy, is not going to help anyone through. We have the strongest balance sheet in the G7 right now, the lowest deficit, the lowest debt to GDP ratio. Companies from around the world are investing in Canada because they believe in Canadians. We are wanting to set that strong fiscal position in service of Canadians who are hurting right now. We want to invest more in dental, more in supports, more in growth and jobs, and he wants to cut at this particular time.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of this NDP Liberal Prime Minister, Canada has the worst mortgage debt, has had the worst housing inflation in the G7, and now has the worst GDP per capita change since the Great Depression, and the worst by far in the G7. Those are the devastating statistics that result in very real human costs. That's the reason we have 1,400 homeless encampments in one province alone and 2 million people lined up at food banks. Won't he realize that doubling housing costs and taxing people's food has very real human costs?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, when that individual was Harper's failed housing minister, he built 6 affordable homes across the entire country only. He did not help with the investments that Canadians needed. And his so-called housing plan that he talks about now, which is, again, more performance than substance, lots of slogans, no actual solutions, is not going to deliver for Canadians either. We're doing what he didn't do, which is work with housing advocates, work with municipalities, work with provinces, and deliver the homes Canadians need.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
When I was housing minister, rent and mortgage payments were half of what they are now, and there were almost 200,000 of those affordable homes built right across Canada. Now, this Prime Minister wants to bring in a massive tax on home builders with hikes to capital gains. Now, the most preeminent economist in Canada, Jack Mintz, reveals that would cost our economy 400,000 jobs and $90 billion. Where are those 400,000 unemployed Canadians going to be able to get the food and the money to pay their mortgages?
Before the Right Honourable Prime Minister takes the floor, I'd like to remind all members to please not take the floor when they're not recognized by the Chair. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition is instrumentalizing Canadians who are suffering right now to try and score cheap political points. What he is not offering is any sort of solution for Canadians. We put forward the most ambitious housing plan in decades because we know that working with municipalities, working with provinces, working with nonprofit agencies and charitable foundations is a way of delivering homes. I was just in Vancouver speaking to a young student who got into an apartment because of partnerships that this government set up. These are things that make a real difference in people's lives, but he doesn't care.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
As he proposes to quadruple the carbon tax to 61 cents a litre on seniors, small businesses and single moms, the Prime Minister spent his summer in a frenzy of high carbon, high-taxing, high-flying hypocrisy. Newly released data show that he went 92,000 kilometers. In flights, on average, every 2 days, he went 300,000 liters of jet fuel. Why is it that he punishes working-class Canadians with his quadrupling carbon tax when he flies around burning more and more jet fuel?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, perhaps if the Leader of the Opposition had actually met with Canadians or talked with media or been out there across the country over the course of the summer, he would have heard the fact that Canadians need support from government programs and services. Canadians want to see $10 a day childcare. Canadians want to see support on dental care. Canadians want to see a national school food program. These are all things that he wants to cut because that's all he's offering Canadians. That shows me he wasn't listening to Canadians he was talking to. He was just making sure he could use them to advance his own political aims. We're offering salute.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
So there you have it. He was charging Canadians for his 92,000 kilometers of flights so that he could go around repeating the promises that he's broken nationwide while taxing them. And his plan is to hike that tax to 61 cents a litre. Mr. Speaker, he emitted more carbon than 114 Canadians combined this summer. Why does the Prime Minister drive people into poverty, children into hunger, with promises he breaks and hypocrisy that he cannot reconcile?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, now Canadians know, Mr. Speaker, in the unfortunate event that that guy ever ends up Prime Minister, he's going to stay at home in his basement on YouTube the whole time instead of meeting with Canadians.
Yeah, that's right.
What's he got against YouTube?
The Honourable Leader of the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, we can resolve that question right now with a carbon tax election. Mais on sait que le Premier ministre ne veut.
But we know the Prime Minister doesn't want to do that because he has such a bad record on the environment and on the economy. It's not just tax hikes, but Canada is now ranked 63rd out of 67 countries when it comes to the effectiveness of our fight against climate change. So that's the hypocrisy. He's doing nothing for the environment. Is he not willing to try to defend his disastrous record before Canadians? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, Canadians are starting to see that the leader of the Conservative Party has no plan whatsoever to fight climate change, no plan to put more money in Canadians' pockets while fighting climate change, and clearly, he doesn't understand that the only way to create an economy for the future is to deal with the environment at the same time. So the Conservative leader's refusal to understand the absolute necessity of continuing the fight against climate change shows how completely out of touch he is with Canadians and Quebecers. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Well, we've already said that we wouldn't change the law on abortion, and what he's saying is completely false. We will protect women. We will protect women with legislation against violence that has shot up by 53% after 9 years of this Prime Minister because of his policies that releases the most violent reoffenders. Now, will the Prime Minister allow Quebecers to vote to stop crime by putting true criminals behind bars and by making our border safer? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, women in Canada know full well that to be pro-choice means standing up against all those who seek to limit women's rights, who seek to take rights away from women, as we've seen in the U.S., and what we see from this Conservative leader over and over again is that he is incapable of standing up to members of his own caucus who would like to limit access to abortion. and who even vote in favor of measures. He even votes in favor of those members. It's shameful, Mr. Speaker.